Hello everyone and welcome back, and in this tutorial we're going to be covering the rendering of these particles, and I'm going to show a couple different techniques. One where we're just going to render this as points, one where we render it as a volume, and we can have some fake sort of lighting that we're going to introduce by creating a temperature field. And if you want to learn how we created the simulation part, that's in the previous tutorial, but on this we're going to focus on the rendering. So if we pick up where we left off in Houdini, I'm just going to change the background to black quickly so it looks cool, and we dive inside our network and we've got this null with our out points, and we're just transforming it up so it sits on the floor. And then we're going to dive into stage. So this was just my test. I'm just going to delete this so we can start from scratch. And we're going to select this null again, and in stage we're going to say SOP import, and we're just going to import those points from SOPs, and that's it. Okay, we're going to put down a merge because I like to have my lighting off to the side. So let's put down a light, feed this in, and let's increase the intensity. Let's just make it red so it's obvious when we take a look at it. And we want to see that red color. Make it a point light. And of course it's not showing up because we're not viewing it here. So let's make it as a point light. And why is it still not showing? Yeah, there we go. We need to make sure we're actually looking at the render. So now we can see the sort of what our light is contributing to our shot. So let's just make it white again. And if we enable this color temperature, we can shift it from orange to blue. And just click on normalize power. And I just want to create a tag for this so we can control this light in compositing should we need it. So let's just call this point light. Let's make a copy. Let's call this sunlight. And let's set a distant light. And I want to just light the sort of like backlit sort of rim of these particles on the left hand side. So let's just move around our particles so we can place them a bit better. And so it's not rotating, so let's just manually rotate this. Cool, something like that. And maybe we want another one on the other side. Let's just rotate this to be a bit more backlit. That's maybe too much. Let's take it back. Cool, something like that's fine. Let's make another one. And let's rotate this to light the other side. And let's call this sunlight 2. Or we should only have one light, so let's instead call this backlight right light rather. And let's make this one left light. And let's just change this to be a bit more orangey. And enable our point light. So this is looking cool. Let's do a quick save. And then all I want next is an environment light. Let's don't try it, no. Environment light, cool. And let's load in an HDRI. I've got one on my desktop. And I've got this artistic workshop HDRI from HDRI Haven. I'm just going to set this to dark and disable it. But now we can see its effect on our scene. Put down another merge here so we can bring in the ground, because I don't want the light to come from the bottom. I want something to sort of obscure the light from the bottom. So let's just put a circle down, make sure that's sitting on our ground plane. Let's make it light so we can see it. That's cool. Let's make it bigger. We can add a color to this, and that color should contribute a bit. Okay. It doesn't really matter what this looks like, because I'm actually going to matte it out. I just wanted to sort of just stop the light from coming from the bottom. So let's just label these point and ground, and let's put a render geometry settings, and then we can set this to matte. So over here we enable this and set this to matte, and now it's matted out. Cool. Let's also put a render geometry settings on our points, and I'll come over to Karma, and we can enable motion blur. So set here, and we say velocity blur. So next, let's put down a material library node so we can create some shaders, and we're going to also need a material assign node so we can assign those shaders to our sim. So let's put down material X, and let's bring in this geometry color, and let's feed that into the color. So this is going to read the color from the geometry. And I'm just going to turn up the roughness a bit, and we're going to call this points, and then we want to come over here and change this our layout to Solaris, and now we just come over to points and we add that here, and under our materials we can add our points, and again change this to dark. And here we can, now that we can see it, we can mess with our settings if we want. If I remove the color, you can see it's just white, and now we bring that color through from the geometry, which is cool. Okay, so let's add a camera. And let's come over and say comma, and this gives us our render settings. Now I've got a preset saved, and so I'm just going to tick that, and we can take a look at the settings. This is just my default. You've got to make sure that it's rendering in ACES, and then my AOVs. So you can just copy my settings here. And I also like to add these crypto mats and crypto material, and that will allow us some control and comps. Under filters, we could well, let's see what this looks like with global illumination, and see if it's doing much. We can disable this depth of field, and we've got the motion blur turned on. Let's just do a quick save. And if we take a snapshot, we can compare our settings. Let's turn the global illumination off and just see how much it's contributing. Let's wait for this to render. Cool, so now we can compare and not really doing much. So let's just keep it down. And maybe we can just increase our sample pixels because it is a bit noisy. There's a lot of light bouncing around on all these particles. Do another snapshot. And it's looking a bit better. We can turn on this filtering and we can denoise, apply a denoiser to it. Let's try this out. As you can see, it's denoising. It's important that we have the albedo and the normals to denoise. And again, it's a little bit better, I guess. Not much. So I think that's it for our render settings, and here we can say if we want to render our frame range. I'm just going to save this to my E drive. Portal render, and let's paste that in here. Save, and then render to disk. Okay, cool. So let's render this to disk, and now we're going to take a look at rendering this as a volume and doing some interesting things with it. So let's take this wrangle and let's just create a density attribute. So we can say density, and we can just make it equal like the P scale or something like that. Or we could just say density equals 1, but this is fine. And then let's rasterize those attributes, and let's rasterize the color and the density. Let's lower our resolution so it's higher res, because we're dealing with very small particles. So these settings should be cool, and if we want to visualize with the color, let's use a visualization node, volume viz. Let's increase our density, and it's not showing up. Why is that? Maybe our particles are too small. Weird. Okay, so it's showing up. This just really increased this a lot. Okay, so our density is pretty low because our P scale is pretty small. So let's just multiply this by 1,000. Now you can see it's very thick, so we can bring this down. Let's make it 10,000 or 100,000, and that's better. So if we want it to be more transparent, we could do that, but I'm just going to make this 50,000. Save. So let's call this out volume, and let's bring in another, we'll make a copy of this and call it volume. And then we're just going to paste that out volume and then plug this in here rather. Now of course we need to change the shader, and I usually use the pyrobake to generate my shaders. Let's just have a look here quick. And let's try to bring the color in. And actually I think it's better to just, yeah, let's use the pyrobake tool. That's how I normally do it. So let's come back. Let's assign this though first. And let's put a pyrobake. So as you can see, let's increase our density here, and you can see the density is reading in the color, and we've got the scatter, but we don't have any temperature or anything yet, but we'll create one. And I'm just going to say we're going to create a shader and put it in our assigned material here, in our material library I should say. Delete that, and then let's assign our shader. Now this is not what I expected. Combine shader. We should be seeing the color. Okay, so we have to apply this pyro shader. The combined volumes doesn't seem to work, but now it's working. And you can see our lights seem a little bit brighter than it did on the particles. Definitely a lot more contrast in this version. So maybe we can tweak our lights. Lower our density and see what happens. Cool. Yeah, let's bring our lights down. We can always change this in comp, of course, but let's get it as good as we can in Houdini first. We can turn our motion blur off here and actually bake the motion blur into our volume. So let's come out to SOPs, and on our volume rasterize we can tick on this velocity blur, and that'll bake the blur into the volume. So now we can render it without, so it should render faster. Cool. So this is the difference. Definitely lots more contrast in our image. We could, you know, we could bring up our environment light maybe to compensate for that if we want to. So we could try that. You know, so now it's closer to our particle look. But I kind of like the contrast. Lower our density to bring more light through it if we wanted. Yeah, this is up. This is a personal preference at this point. I'm going to increase the density. And now I'm going to try and create a light. Well, like sort of isolate its core and then use this to emit some sort of temperature, and that will illuminate from within. So let's just call this neighbors, and because I'm trying to isolate neighboring points. So anything that's tightly clustered together, we're going to keep, and anything not, we're going to remove. And I have a feeling that because this is, you know, such a high-res dense sim, it might not work just yet. We'll have to play with it. But here I'm just blasting anything with a neighbor value greater than 1. And I'm not getting what I want. Let's try point. It's what I'm going to do is pop this into the color so we can investigate. So we can see we are capturing something. Let's play with these values. So the lower we get, the more. No, so I want this to be black and white, so it should be 0 and 1. Let's just so it's not working yet. Let's try reducing our points. So it is working. It's just that our sim is very high res, so I'm not getting exactly what I want yet. I mean, this could work, but I think we can make it better. Let's try bypassing. I think that's our P scale. Let's take it up right from here. Let's take a look now. This should definitely be 1. Let's take a look now. Okay. And let's reduce our points. Cool. So this. Cool. So let's rasterize attributes. And we want the color and the density, or we could just do the density. And let's try and capture this. Once again, this is low. So we could also just do an attribute create. Scale's now 1. Could just, could just call it density and give it a value of 1. This is fine. And now you can see we've got some data there. We're taking on our velocity blur. And we're just going to multiply this up. And actually, we need a volume wrangle, not a attribute wrangle. So now we can see it. And I'm going to rename this. So we can take the density, that field, and we're saying, okay, cool. Its name is density, and we want to change it from density to temperature. So we're creating a temperature now from the density, or at least renaming it. And we can blast the color. We don't actually need it. So I know that that maybe this is necessary if I just didn't rasterize that attribute, but I want to show you how you can manipulate data. And here we're just gonna clamp our temperature, and we're just gonna make sure that everything is hot, and we're gonna map it between 0 and 1. Cool. And now we can scatter points in this volume, because we're gonna need points to do a lookup. And I'm gonna put down a volume varp. And then our second input is going to be our main volume. So first what I need to do actually, so we've got that temperature, and we need to combine these two. Well, sort of use this like a boolean. So we want to cut out the temperature from out of our original volume. So that way, the voxel sizes will match up and everything. So we're kind of using this like a boolean. It looks the same, but we're actually booleaning this from our original volume. And then we can scatter let's see. So we're looking up our points. And they're from the second input. And we want the position of the first one, or the second one I should say. And we're going to subtract this from our density. So now it's working like a boolean. It's going to subtract the where the points are from our original thing, and I'm using this power just to fade things off. Let's use a fit and let's expose these parameters so we can have some control. I think I need to name this. Seems right. Cool, so yeah, it comes in from here, not the points. I'm just using the points as a lookup. So we take it from the volumes, and now this should work. And now we can merge these two volumes, and they match up. Cool, and you can kind of see that there's a volume inside the other one. If we put in our pyrobake here, now we can use that field that is called temperature, and we can turn on our scatter. And as you can see, now it is showing up within our volume. So now we can mess with this and, you know, choose different looks. Let's go with this blue one. I think it looks cool. Maybe bring this down. Turn on blurring. And then again, this is just all personal preference. You can mess around with this. I kind of want it a little bit deeper inside. Maybe increase this now. And this looks pretty cool. Let's go to stage, not shop. Yeah. Let's just turn off the lights, and we can see it is working with the lights turned off now. So let's increase the amount of illumination. I want this to be brighter. And that's looking cool. And now if we turn our lights on, yeah, that's looking really good. Let's bring our environment down to make the scene darker because we want the light to illuminate it. And then we can turn on our left and right lights, but let's turn them down a bit. Cool, let's do a quick save. And then we can check out our volume limits. We can turn this on and see how much better it looks. But of course, when you turn this up, it's going to come at a render time cost. So let's just, it's not a huge difference. So maybe we just want to turn it off in this case. I try to keep it all my renders below 10 minutes a frame if I can. So you can see that's going to take forever. Again, this seems really slow. So let's just turn it off. Unfortunately, this is a bit slow, so I like, if I, I would prefer to use Arnold and just use a geometry light, and that renders pretty fast. But I wanted to show this technique anyway. So this looks cool. And I'm just going to, we can do a tiny bit of slap comp on this, just to add some glows, not much really. So we can save this as an EXR. So that's going to save to disk. I should probably actually just do a few frames. So let's say frame range, and I'm just going to render 40 frames out. Let this run for a while, a few hours. Okay, so I've rendered out 40 frames. And let's go and quickly composite this in Nuke. So I'm going to come over to Nuke, and I'm going to drag and drop the renders in, and it's not going, so I need to change it to compositing view. And now if I drag and drop it in, so press S on our keyboard and come over to color, let's say aces, and change it to this. And make sure that we select the correct size. Now we're going to put an exponential glow, and you can see those, we need to put a clamp to get rid of those black squares. So we clamp our values, and then we can always turn down our glows. Just A being here quickly. Let's put a keyer so we can isolate just the brightest spots. So let's look at our alpha, and let's move these sliders in. So we're just selecting what we need, or the brightest spots I should say. Let's add a blur, just blur this out. So that's fine. Let's make a copy of our exponential blur, and then let's pipe it in. And you can see it's not masking out. So we need to tick something on. Turn it down a bit. And we need to tick this on, so we've got alpha. And now you can see it's just applied where we need it. If we turn this up, we're just affecting the brightest parts. So, the rule with the with glows is whatever you think looks right, halve it, because people always tend to overglow. I'm going to do a color correct. And let's bring the gain down so we can darken it. And this is going to be our vignette. And we can put down a roto node and just draw a circle. And then just like that, we can, mask this. You can see it's inverted. So the opposite of what we want. It's darkening the middle part, not the outside part. So let's just put down an invert. And now it's darkening the outside parts. And of course, we need to blur this. So now we've got a bit of a vignette. And from there, I always like to add a little bit of a blur to my renders. So it's just not so digital looking, not so super crisp. Just a kiss, I guess, of blur. And then let's add some chromatic aberration. Obviously, this is too much. Just a tiny amount. I mean, that's quite a lot, but let's... There we go, just a subtle amount. Let's do a quick save. And we can add some grain. Let's add an advanced grain. We can try and dial this in, or we could use some presets. Something like this. Maybe this is a bit too much, so we can always just turn down the intensity. And let's write this out to disk. Just gonna find the correct spot. And I'm looking for a setting. I don't see it here. Don't know why I'm not seeing it, but let's change our aces again to aces 1.2. And here under output, sRGB. Cool. And we can now render this off to disk. So we just have this as a JPEG sequence, and I'm going to play this in DJV. And cool, we've got something. Maybe the grain's too much. So we can come back and just dial down the intensity. quite a bit. Can add another glow. Turn this down. Still quite a lot. Maybe stretch it out. Really reduce this a lot. And do a save, and then we can just re-render. Cool. So that's just a very basic slap comp, just so it doesn't look too digital or too CG. I mean, it's clearly CG, but you know, it's nice to simulate some lens effects on things and a little bit of glows. Cool, hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.